Imagine pulling a single penny from your pocket and realizing it might carry a story far bigger than its face value. A penny that looks ordinary at first glance, yet quietly connects you to American history, everyday life in the 1980s, and the hidden world of coin collecting. Today, we're talking about the 1986 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin millions of people have handled without ever stopping to look twice. The 1986 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced in the United States during a time of economic change and cultural transition. When people say no mint mark, they mean the coin was made at the Philadelphia Mint. For most of American coin history, Philadelphia pennies were not stamped with a mint mark, so the absence of a letter under the date is itself a clue to where the coin was made. This small detail is often overlooked, but for collectors, it's one of the first things they check. To understand this penny, we need to step back to 1986. Ronald Reagan was president, personal computers were entering homes, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins to keep up with daily commerce. The Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for over 75 years, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By 1986, the Lincoln penny was one of the most familiar objects in American life. The obverse, or front, of the coin features Abraham Lincoln's profile, a design created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. This portrait was revolutionary when it first appeared because Lincoln was the first real historical person to be shown on a regularly circulating U.S. coin. By 1986, this image had become iconic. Above Lincoln's head is the phrase, "In God We Trust." In front of his face is the word "Liberty," and just behind him is the date, 1986. The reverse, or back, of the 1986 penny shows the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely at the memorial, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting inside. This means Lincoln appears on both sides of the coin, a subtle detail many people never notice. Along the top edge are the words United States of America, and at the bottom is 1 cent, with E pluribus unum above the memorial. One of the most important features of the 1986 penny is what it's made of. By this time, pennies were no longer solid copper. Rising copper prices in the late 1970s and early 1980s forced the U.S. Mint to change the composition. Starting in 1982, pennies were made with a core of zinc coated in a thin layer of copper. The 1986 penny follows this standard, weighing about 2.5 grams and containing 97.5% zinc and just 2.5% copper. At first glance, this might sound disappointing to collectors who love old copper coins. But the zinc era introduced new possibilities for errors and varieties. Because the copper coating is so thin, it can sometimes wear away, bubble, or split, creating unusual appearances. These imperfections are part of what makes certain 1986 pennies interesting and, in some cases, valuable. So is the 1986 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny rare? In normal condition, the honest answer is no. The Philadelphia Mint produced billions of pennies that year. Most examples found in circulation are worth exactly 1 cent. However, rarity in coin collecting is not always about the date alone. It's about condition, errors, and special varieties. A high-grade 1986 penny that has never been circulated, meaning it shows no wear and still has its original shine, can be worth more than face value. Collectors use a grading scale, and coins graded at the very top, with sharp details and clean surfaces, are much harder to find than worn examples. These pristine coins were often pulled directly from mint rolls and carefully preserved. Even more exciting are error coins. Some 1986 no-mint Mark pennies were struck with mistakes that slipped past quality control. One of the most sought-after errors is a doubled die. This happens when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during its creation, causing parts of the design to appear doubled. On a doubled die penny, you might notice doubling in the date, the word liberty, or in God we trust. These errors can significantly increase a coin's value. Another type of error is an off-center strike, where the design is not properly aligned on the blank coin. This can result in part of the design being cut off, leaving a dramatic and unusual look. There are also clipped planchets, where the metal blank was improperly cut before striking, creating a missing curved section on the coin. Collectors have paid surprising amounts for high-quality or error examples of the 1986 penny. While a regular circulated coin might be worth only a cent, an uncirculated example graded at a high level can sell for several dollars. Error coins can go much higher. Verified double die or major error pennies from 1986 have sold at auctions for tens or even hundreds of dollars, depending on the severity of the error and the condition of the coin. If you think you might have a valuable 1986 no mint mark penny, identification is key. Start by checking the date and looking under it for a mint mark. If there is no letter, it was made in Philadelphia. Next, examine the coin under good lighting and, if possible, with a magnifying glass. Look closely at the letters and numbers for any signs of doubling, especially in the date and inscriptions. Weighing the coin can also help. A standard 1986 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. A significant difference could indicate an error or damage. Be cautious, though, because damage from circulation can sometimes mimic mint errors. Scratches, dents, and corrosion usually reduce a coin's value rather than increase it. When it comes to fakes, the good news is that fake 1986 pennies are rare because most examples are not extremely valuable. However, altered coins do exist. Some people try to modify ordinary pennies to imitate errors. This is why professional grading services are so important. If you believe you have a significant error or a high-grade coin, having it authenticated can protect you from mistakes and confirm its true value. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1986 penny. For example, this coin was produced during a time when cash was still king. Debit cards were not common, and most daily purchases involved coins and paper money. That means these pennies were heavily used, making well-preserved examples more difficult to find today. Another interesting detail is that many people who were children in 1986 remember pennies like this one from their allowance, school lunches, or arcade visits. For collectors, coins like the 1986 Lincoln penny are not just metal objects. They are time capsules that connect personal memories with national history. Collectors today appreciate the 1986 no mint mark penny for its accessibility. It's a coin that almost anyone can find, which makes it a perfect entry point into coin collecting. Beginners can learn how to identify mint marks, understand grading, and spot errors without needing a large budget. Experienced collectors enjoy searching for high-grade examples or rare mistakes hidden among ordinary coins. In the end, the 1986 no mint mark Lincoln penny reminds us that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it's not about instant riches, but about curiosity, history, and the thrill of discovery. The next time you see a simple penny dated 1986, take a moment to look closer. You might be holding a small piece of American history, quietly waiting to be appreciated. Most people would walk right past this coin without a second thought. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. But hidden inside millions of pockets and jars is a 2006 D Lincoln penny that tells a surprisingly interesting story, and in rare cases, can be worth far more than 1 cent. This is the 2006 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that many Americans have handled without ever really seeing. Today, We're going to slow down, look closer, and uncover why this simple penny still matters to collectors, historians, and everyday people who wonder if the change in their hand could be something more. The 2006 D Lincoln penny was struck by the United States Mint in Denver, which is why it carries the small d mint mark just below the year. It belongs to the long-running Lincoln Memorial Penny series, a design that ran from 1959 until 2008 and became one of the most familiar coins in American history. By 2006, this design had already been in circulation for nearly 5 decades. In 2006, the United States was in a period of transition. The economy was stable, digital payments were growing, but cash was still king. Pennies were still being minted in massive numbers for daily commerce. The Denver Mint alone produced over 3 billion Lincoln cents that year. This means the 2006 D penny is not rare in the traditional sense. But rarity in coin collecting doesn't always come from low mintage. Sometimes it comes from condition, mistakes, and small details most people never notice. The penny features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, originally designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner in 1909. Lincoln faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date with the D Mint mark to the right. This design has survived wars, depressions, and generations of Americans, making it one of the most recognizable images in U.S. history. On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, a design created by Frank Gasparro. Look closely, and you'll notice a tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, making this one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides. By 2006, this reverse design was nearing the end of its run, which adds historical significance. Just 3 years later, the Lincoln Memorial would be replaced with new reverse designs. The 2006 D penny is made primarily of zinc, with a thin copper coating on the outside. This composition was introduced in 1982 as a cost-saving measure. While it looks like solid copper, it's actually about 97.5% zinc. This detail matters because zinc pennies are more vulnerable to damage, corrosion, and wear, especially if the copper coating is scratched or split. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made by the billions? The answer lies in errors and condition. Most 2006 D pennies are worth exactly 1 cent, but a small number escape the mint with mistakes that collectors actively search for. One of the most desirable errors is a double die, where parts of the design appear doubled, especially on the date or lettering. Another valuable error is an off-center strike, where the coin design is noticeably shifted, leaving blank space on one side. There are also clipped planchets, where part of the coin is missing due to a cutting error during production. Another error collectors look for is a broad strike, where the coin is struck without the retaining collar, causing it to spread wider than normal. These coins look slightly flattened and oversized. Even small cracks in the die can create raised lines on the coin, known as die cracks, which can increase collector interest depending on how dramatic they are. Condition is just as important as errors. A 2006 D penny that has never been circulated, meaning it shows no wear and still has its original mint luster, can be worth significantly more than face value. Coins graded as mint state by professional grading services can sell for several dollars, and in top grades, sometimes more. There have been real auction examples where high-grade 2006 D pennies sold for surprising amounts. Perfect or near-perfect examples, graded MS68 or higher, have sold for tens to even hundreds of dollars. These are coins that look almost flawless under magnification, with sharp details and brilliant surfaces. Error coins can sell for even more. Depending on the type and severity of the error, prices can range from $20 to several $100s. These are not everyday finds, but they do exist, and they do turn up in circulation from time to time. Of course, with collectible coins comes the risk of confusion and misinformation. The good news is that fake 2006D pennies are extremely rare because the base coin itself is common. Still, it's important to know what to look for. A genuine coin will have a clear D mint mark, proper weight of about 2.5 grams, and sharp details consistent with U.S. mint standards. Be cautious of coins that appear altered. Some people attempt to damage or modify pennies to imitate errors. Real mint errors usually show smooth, natural metal flow, not rough or tool-like marks. If you think you've found something unusual, comparing it to a normal penny from the same year can be very helpful. One surprising fact about the 2006D penny is how close it sits to a major turning point in U.S. coinage history. Just 3 years later, in 2009, the Lincoln cent would undergo a dramatic redesign to celebrate Lincoln's 200th birthday. That makes the 2006 issue one of the final standard Lincoln Memorial pennies before change arrived. Another fun detail is that many 2006 pennies were saved in rolls by collectors who believed zinc cents might one day be discontinued. While that hasn't happened yet, it has created a unique situation where millions of uncirculated coins still exist, waiting to be rediscovered. Collectors love the 2006D penny not because it's rare, but because it represents the everyday history of American money. It's a reminder that even ordinary objects carry stories. It's also a perfect entry point for new collectors, because searching through pocket change is free, accessible, and surprisingly exciting. There's something powerful about the idea that a coin you've ignored for years could suddenly feel important just because you looked closer. That's what keeps collectors searching rolls, jars, and old drawers. So the next time you see a 2006D Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Turn it over. Look at the details. Check the date, the mint mark, and the condition. Because while most are just 1 cent, a few tell a much bigger story. And sometimes, the most interesting treasures aren't hidden in vaults or museums. They're hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. Most people would never look twice at a 1973 penny. But what if I told you that one small detail on this coin can quietly change its story, its demand, and sometimes its value in ways most owners never notice? Today we're talking about the 1973 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. A coin that seems ordinary at first glance, yet carries a history tied to a changing America, hidden collector interest, and a few surprises that still catch people off guard. The coin we're focusing on is the 1973 Lincoln 1 cent coin struck without a mint mark. When a U.S. coin has no mint mark, it means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. For decades, Philadelphia did not place a mint mark on most coins, so no mint mark is not a mistake. It's an intentional part of the design and an important clue to where the coin was produced. In 1973, the Lincoln penny had already been in circulation for more than 6 decades. Abraham Lincoln's portrait had appeared on the cent since 1909, and by the early 1970s, this design was deeply familiar to Americans. Still, the country around it was changing fast, and so was the role of everyday money. The year 1973 was a turbulent time in U.S. history. America was dealing with inflation, rising prices, and uncertainty about the economy. The cost of metals was climbing, and there was growing concern about how expensive it was becoming to make coins. Just a few years earlier, the U.S. Mint had removed silver from dimes and quarters. Pennies, however, were still being made mostly from copper. The 1973 Lincoln penny is composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This is important because only a few years later, in 1982, the composition of the penny would change dramatically to mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. That makes the 1973 penny part of the final generation of traditional copper cents, something collectors pay close attention to today. The design of the coin is classic and simple. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1973 to the right. There is no letter below the date, confirming it was struck in Philadelphia. On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, with the tiny seated statue of Lincoln visible between the columns, along with the words 1 cent and United States of America. At first glance, there's nothing flashy or dramatic about this coin, but collectors know that value often hides in condition and details, not just age. So why would anyone care about a 1973 no mint mark penny? The answer starts with how many were made. In 1973, the Philadelphia Mint produced well over 2 billion Lincoln cents. That's a massive number. Because of this, most 1973 pennies you find in circulation are worth only 1 cent. This is an important truth that often gets overlooked in online hype. However, rarity in coin collecting does not always mean low mintage. Sometimes rarity means survival in excellent condition. Most 1973 pennies were heavily used. They were dropped into jars, pockets, and cash registers. They were scratched, discolored, and worn down over time. Finding one today in pristine, almost perfect condition is far less common than finding a worn example. Collectors grade coins on a scale, and pennies that survive in high mint state condition, especially with bright red copper color, are the ones that attract serious attention. A 1973 penny that looks brand new, with sharp details and original luster, is something collectors will stop and examine closely. Errors are another reason this coin can matter. While the standard 1973 no mint mark penny is common, a small number were struck with minting errors. These can include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, weak strikes, or subtle doubled details. Some 1973 pennies show minor doubling in the lettering or date, caused by issues during the die-making process. These errors are not obvious to the untrained eye, which is why many people overlook them. But to collectors, even a small, confirmed error can turn an everyday penny into a collectible piece. When it comes to real-world value, most circulated 1973 no mint mark pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. That's the reality. But condition changes everything. Uncirculated examples can sell for a few dollars. Pennies graded by professional grading services in very high mint state, especially those labeled as bright red, have sold for much more. Some top-grade examples have reached into the hundreds of dollars at auction. These are not everyday finds, but they do exist, and they prove that even a common coin can become valuable under the right circumstances. Error coins from 1973 can also bring strong prices. Depending on the type and severity of the error, collectors may pay anywhere from tens to hundreds of dollars. The key is authenticity and proper identification. That brings us to an important question. How do you know if a 1973 no mint mark penny is real and worth examining further? First, check the date and the area below it. There should be no letter. If you see a D or an S, it was made in Denver or San Francisco, not Philadelphia. No mint mark is correct for this coin. Next, look at the weight. A genuine 1973 copper penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. A digital scale can help confirm this. A significantly lighter coin could indicate damage, alteration, or a later zinc cent that's been changed. Examine the color and surface. Natural copper tones range from red to brown. Be cautious of coins that look artificially shiny or have unusual color, as they may have been cleaned. Cleaning a coin can destroy its collector value. If you suspect an error, compare your coin to images from trusted coin references or have it examined by a professional coin dealer or grading service. Many supposed rare pennies turn out to be normal coins with damage from circulation. One surprising fact about the 1973 penny is how many people unknowingly saved them. Because the 1970s were a time of change in U.S. coinage, many Americans began pulling pennies aside, thinking copper would become valuable. As a result, large numbers were hoarded, which is another reason circulated examples are still easy to find today. Another interesting detail is that 1973 pennies were never officially released in proof sets without mint marks. Proof coins from that year were struck in San Francisco and carry an S mint mark. This makes any claim of a 1973 proof no mint mark, something to question carefully. Collectors today are drawn to the 1973 no mint mark penny not because it's legendary or mysterious, but because it represents the end of an era. It's part of the final stretch of classic copper cents, made before cost-cutting changes reshaped U.S. coinage forever. For newer collectors, it's an affordable entry point. For experienced collectors, it's a condition rarity challenge. Finding the best possible example among billions is not easy, and that hunt is what keeps people interested. The 1973 Lincoln penny also reminds us of an important lesson in coin collecting. Not every old coin is valuable, but every coin has a story. Value is about context, condition, and history, not just age or rumors. So if you come across a 1973 no mint mark penny in your change, don't expect instant riches. But do take a closer look. Check the condition. Look for unusual details. Weigh it. Compare it. Because sometimes the most ordinary-looking coin is the one that teaches you the most about money, history, and the hidden world of collecting. And who knows, the next time you glance at a simple brown penny, you might see it not as spare change, but as a small copper witness to a changing America, quietly waiting to be noticed. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a penny, and realizing it connects you to a moment in American history when money itself was about to change. A coin so ordinary that millions ignored it, yet so perfectly timed that collectors still talk about it decades later. This is the story of the 1980 no mint mark Lincoln penny. Most people don't give pennies a second thought. They sit in jars, cup holders, and old drawers. But every once in a while, a single year stands out, not because it was flashy, but because it was quietly important. The 1980 Lincoln penny is one of those coins. It looks simple, familiar, even boring at first glance. But behind that simple design is a turning point in U.S. coin history. The coin we're talking about today is the 1980 Lincoln Memorial penny with no mint mark. If you see no letter under the date on the front of the coin, that means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. For much of U.S. history, Philadelphia pennies did not carry a mint mark, so no mint mark is actually a clue to where it was made. To understand why the 1980 penny matters, we need to go back to what was happening in America at the time. The year 1980 was a period of economic uncertainty. Inflation was high. Metal prices were rising. The cost of making coins, especially pennies, was becoming a serious concern for the U.S. government. Copper prices were climbing, and officials were already questioning whether it made sense to keep producing pennies made mostly of copper. At that time, the Lincoln penny was still composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc. That meant every penny had real metal value built into it. In fact, within just a few years, the U.S. Mint would abandon this formula entirely. But in 1980, the change had not happened yet. That makes the 1980 no mint mark penny one of the last full years of traditional copper Lincoln cents. The design of the coin is classic and instantly recognizable. On the front, you see the profile of Abraham Lincoln, a design first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. It was the first time a real person appeared on a circulating U.S. coin. Above Lincoln's head is the word liberty, and behind him is the phrase "In God we trust." The date, 1980, appears in front of his face. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial is shown, a design introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial. This level of detail is something many people never notice, even after handling these coins for years. Now let's talk about what makes the 1980 no mint mark penny unique. First, it is made of solid copper, unlike most pennies made after 1982. That alone gives it a different weight and feel. A genuine 1980 copper penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it feels lighter, it might be a later zinc penny or damaged. Second, it was produced in very large numbers. The Philadelphia Mint struck well over 7 billion pennies in 1980. That means this is not a rare coin in everyday condition, and that's important to say clearly. Most 1980 no-mint mark pennies are worth only 1 cent. So why do collectors care about it at all? The answer lies in condition, errors, and historical context. While millions were made, very few survive in perfect, uncirculated condition. Pennies are used heavily, dropped, scratched, and worn down. Finding a 1980 penny with full original luster, sharp details, and no marks is much harder than most people realize. Collectors also look for mint errors. In 1980, the minting process was fast and industrial, and mistakes did happen. Some pennies were struck off-center. Others show doubled letters or numbers, where parts of the design appear slightly repeated. There are also cases of die cracks, where thin raised lines appear on the surface due to worn equipment. One of the most talked about error types is doubling in the date or lettering. When genuine and strong, these errors can significantly increase a coin's value. However, many people confuse damage or machine doubling with true mint errors, so careful examination is essential. In recent years, high-grade examples of the 1980 no-mint mark penny have sold for surprising prices. Pennies graded by professional services in near-perfect condition have sold at auction for hundreds of dollars. These are coins that look almost exactly as they did the day they left the mint, with bright copper color and no visible wear. Error coins can sell for even more. Strong doubled dies or dramatic off-center strikes can attract serious collector interest, especially when verified by a reputable grading company. Identifying a real and valuable example is not difficult, but it does require patience. Start by checking the weight. A digital scale is helpful. Then look closely at the date and lettering using a magnifying glass. Pay attention to sharpness and clarity. True doubling will look clean and intentional, not blurry or smeared. Also check the color. Original copper pennies often have a rich red or reddish-brown tone. Extremely dark or unusually shiny surfaces may indicate cleaning, which reduces collector value. As for fakes, outright counterfeit 1980 pennies are rare because the coin is generally low value. However, altered coins do exist. Some people try to modify dates or exaggerate errors. That's why professional grading and authentication are important for any coin you believe might be valuable. Here's a fun fact many people don't know. Because copper prices rose so much after 1980, some people began hoarding copper pennies, believing they might one day be worth more melted down than as currency. While melting U.S. coins is illegal, this behavior shows how closely tied the 1980 penny is to economic change. Another interesting detail is that just 2 years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint permanently switched to zinc-based pennies. That makes the 1980 no-mint mark penny part of the final chapter of an era that lasted nearly a century. Collectors love this coin not because it's flashy, but because it represents a transition. It is the end of traditional copper pennies and the beginning of a cheaper, lighter future for U.S. coinage. It reminds people of a time when even the smallest coin carried real metal weight. Today, the 1980 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is often recommended to new collectors. It's affordable, easy to find, and full of learning opportunities. It teaches how condition affects value, how mint marks work, and why history matters in coin collecting. So the next time you come across a 1980 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it for a moment. Feel its weight. Look at its color. Think about the year it was made and the changes happening behind the scenes. Because sometimes, the most ordinary coins tell the most important stories. And sometimes, the value of a coin isn't just what it sells for, but what it represents in the long journey of American money. Imagine finding a single penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet quietly carries a story connected to one of the most dramatic decades in American history. A penny struck during a time of social change, rising prices, and major shifts in U.S. money itself. That coin is the 1970 D Lincoln penny, and by the end of this video, you may never look at your loose change the same way again. The 1970 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint in Denver. The small letter D just below the date tells us exactly where it was made. At first glance, it looks like millions of other Lincoln cents. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile faces right on the front, while the back shows the Lincoln Memorial, a design Americans had already seen for more than a decade by 1970. But what makes this penny interesting is not how flashy it looks. It is the quiet historical moment it represents and the hidden details that collectors still search for today. To understand this coin, we need to step back into the year 1970. America was changing fast. The Vietnam War was still ongoing. Inflation was rising, and the cost of everyday items was going up. Just a few years earlier, the U.S. Mint had made a major decision that would affect pennies forever. In 1962, the penny's metal content was changed from mostly copper to a slightly different copper alloy, and by the late 1960s, the government was already thinking hard about the cost of making coins. The 1970 penny was part of this transition era, when coins were becoming more expensive to produce, but tradition still mattered deeply. The Denver Mint was busy that year. Over 2.8 billion Lincoln pennies were struck with the D Mint mark in 1970. That is a huge number, and it tells us this coin was meant for everyday use. These pennies traveled through cash registers, lunch counters, gas stations, and corner stores all across America. They were handled by people who likely never thought twice about them. Yet today, more than 50 years later, collectors carefully inspect these same coins with magnifying glasses, searching for specific details that can make certain examples far more interesting than others. The metal makeup of the 1970 D Lincoln penny is something collectors pay close attention to. It is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This is important because just 12 years later, in 1982, the penny would switch to a copper-plated zinc composition. That makes the 1970 D penny part of the final generation of mostly copper cents. When you hold one, it feels solid and has a slightly different ring when dropped compared to newer pennies. For many collectors, this copper content adds historical charm, even if it does not automatically make the coin rare. The design of the coin also tells a story. On the front, Abraham Lincoln's portrait was designed by Victor David Brenner and first appeared in 1909. By 1970, this design had already survived wars, economic crashes, and generations of Americans. The back of the coin shows the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial. That small detail fascinates many people once they notice it for the first time. Now comes the big question most people ask. Is the 1970 D Lincoln penny rare or valuable? The honest answer is that most of them are common and worth only a small amount over face value. In circulated condition, meaning coins that were used in daily commerce, they are usually worth just 1 or 2 cents. Even in nice condition, many examples sell for only a few cents. But the story does not end there. Where the 1970 D penny becomes truly interesting is in higher grades and error varieties. Coins that were carefully preserved, never heavily circulated, and graded in mint state condition can be worth significantly more. A 1970 D penny graded MS65 by a professional grading service can sell for around $10 to $20. Examples graded MS66 can reach $40 to $75, depending on color and eye appeal. In rare cases, A top-quality MS-67 example has sold at auction for several $100s. These are not everyday finds, but they do exist. Error coins are another reason collectors search through rolls of 1970D pennies. Some known errors include off-center strikes, where part of the design is missing, clipped planchets, where the coin has a curved bite taken out of it, and die cracks, which appear as raised lines on the surface. There are also rare double die varieties, though they are extremely uncommon for the Denver Mint in 1970. When a genuine error is found, the value can jump from pocket change to hundreds of dollars, depending on the type and severity of the mistake. There have been real auction sales that show the potential of this coin. One well-preserved 1970D penny with strong red color and sharp details sold for over $300 at a major U.S. coin auction. Another example with a dramatic off-center strike sold for more than $500 because of its visual appeal and clear mint error. These prices are not typical, but they show why collectors never stop looking. If you want to identify a genuine 1970D Lincoln penny, the first thing to check is the date and mint mark. The date should read 1970, and the D mint mark will appear just below the date on the front. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people try to change dates or add mint marks to create fake rarities. Under magnification, added mint marks often look uneven or sit in the wrong position. The surface around them may appear disturbed or scratched. Genuine coins will have smooth, natural metal flow around the mint mark. Weight can also help. A real 1970D penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it is significantly lighter or heavier, it could be damaged, altered, or something unusual. The color should also match copper coins from that era. While toning can vary, an unnaturally shiny or oddly colored penny deserves closer inspection. There are also some fun facts about this coin that many people do not realize. In 1970, a penny had far more purchasing power than it does today. You could still buy certain candies or small items for just 1 cent. This penny also comes from the final decade, before the Lincoln Memorial reverse would be replaced in 2009. That makes it part of a design era that lasted exactly 50 years. Collectors today love the 1970D Lincoln penny not because it is flashy or extremely rare, but because it represents accessibility. Anyone can find one. Anyone can start learning about grading, mint marks, and errors using this coin as a starting point. It is often one of the first coins new collectors study seriously. Experienced collectors appreciate it too, especially when hunting for top-grade examples or unusual errors. This coin also reminds people that value is not always obvious. Something small and ordinary can still carry history, craftsmanship, and potential. It encourages patience, curiosity, and careful observation. That mindset is what draws many people into coin collecting in the first place. So the next time you come across a 1970D Lincoln penny, do not dismiss it too quickly. Look at it closely. Notice the details. Think about where it has been and who might have held it decades ago. While it may not make you rich, it might spark a deeper interest in the hidden stories inside America's everyday money. And once that curiosity starts, you may find yourself checking every penny you see, wondering what other quiet treasures are waiting to be discovered. Imagine opening an old drawer, spotting a simple brown penny, and realizing it might carry a quiet story from one of the most turbulent years in American history. A penny most people overlook. A penny struck not for everyday change, but for collectors. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1968 S Mint Mark Lincoln penny coin. The 1968 S Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin that looks familiar at first glance. Abraham Lincoln's portrait faces right on the front, just like millions of other pennies Americans have used for generations. But that small letter beneath the date, the letter S, changes everything. It stands for San Francisco, and in 1968, that mint mark marked the beginning of a new chapter in U.S. coin history. To understand why this penny matters, we need to step back into the late 1960s. The United States was going through enormous change. The Vietnam War dominated the news. Civil rights movements reshaped society. Trust in government was being questioned. Even American coins were affected by economic pressure. Rising metal prices had already forced the U.S. Mint to remove silver from most circulating coins just a few years earlier. During this period, the U.S. Mint made a major decision. From 1965 through 1967, mint marks were removed from all coins to discourage hoarding and speculation. Collectors and investors had been pulling coins out of circulation, hoping mint marks would raise values. By 1968, the mint believed the crisis had passed. Mint marks returned, and with them came a renewed sense of identity for each mint. San Francisco's role changed dramatically in 1968. Instead of producing pennies for circulation, the San Francisco Mint focused almost entirely on proof coins. Proof coins are specially made for collectors, not for spending. They are struck with extra care, using polished dies and planchets, creating sharp details and mirror-like surfaces. That means something very important about the 1968 S Lincoln penny. It was never meant to jingle in your pocket or buy a piece of candy. Every genuine 1968 S penny was made as a proof coin. If you find one that looks dull, heavily worn, or scratched from circulation, that's a red flag. This alone makes the coin unique among Lincoln cents of its era. The design of the 1968 S penny follows the classic Lincoln memorial style introduced in 1959. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln's dignified profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above his head is the word Liberty. To the right is the date, 1968, with the small S mint mark just below it. Along the rim is the phrase, "In God We Trust." On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands centered, with strong vertical lines and fine architectural detail. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln, one of the smallest engraved figures ever placed on a U.S. coin. Around the edges are the words United States of America and 1 cent, with E pluribus unum across the top. The metal composition is also part of its story. The 1968 S Lincoln penny is made of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This gives it a warm, reddish tone when well preserved. Over time, copper reacts with air and moisture, so color becomes extremely important to collectors. A bright red example can be far more valuable than a brown one. So why would a coin made specifically for collectors be considered rare or valuable? The answer lies in condition, demand, and imperfections. While millions of 1968 S-proof pennies were made, most have developed spots, haze, fingerprints, or scratches over the decades. Perfect examples are far less common than people expect. Collectors pay close attention to proof quality. Coins are graded on a scale that measures how flawless they are. A proof coin with deep mirrored fields and frosted design details is especially desirable. These are known as deep cameo proofs. In top grades, they become surprisingly scarce. Errors also play a role. Some 1968 S pennies show doubled die errors, where parts of the design appear doubled due to a misaligned die during striking. These errors are not dramatic to the untrained eye, but once seen, they can't be unseen. Letters may look thicker or slightly shadowed. These error coins can be worth many times more than a standard proof. Real auction records tell us how the market views this penny. A typical 1968 S-proof penny in average condition may sell for just a few dollars, but high-grade examples tell a different story. Coins graded near perfect have sold for hundreds of dollars at major auctions. Deep cameo examples, with strong contrast and flawless surfaces, attract fierce bidding from collectors who want the best of the best. The value jumps even higher when an error is involved. Verified double die proof examples have sold for substantial premiums, especially when certified by professional grading services. These aren't get-rich-quick finds, but they prove that even a modern-looking penny can carry serious collector interest. Knowing how to identify a real 1968 S Lincoln penny is crucial. First, check the mint mark. The S should be neatly formed and positioned just below the date. On proof coins, the details should appear sharp, not blurry. The surfaces should reflect light like a mirror, especially in the fields around Lincoln's portrait. Weight and metal also matter. A genuine copper-proof penny will feel solid and weigh about 3.11 grams. Many fake or altered coins fail this basic test. Also, remember that San Francisco did not produce circulation pennies in 1968. If the coin looks worn from heavy use, it is almost certainly not authentic as a proof. Certification is the safest route for valuable examples. Professional grading services authenticate, grade, and seal coins in protective holders. This not only confirms authenticity, but also preserves the coin for the future. There are also some fascinating details collectors love. The 1968 S penny represents the return of mint marks after a 3-year absence. It marks the modern era of proof coin collecting. It is also one of the earliest proof pennies many Americans remember seeing in family collections or inherited sets. Another surprising fact is how sensitive proof pennies are to handling. A single fingerprint left decades ago can permanently lower a coin's value. This is why collectors stress careful storage, usually in original proof sets or protective holders. Collectors today love the 1968 S Lincoln penny because it sits at the crossroads of history and hobby. It connects the classic copper penny to modern coin collecting. It's affordable for beginners, yet challenging for advanced collectors chasing top grades. It tells a story not of everyday spending, but of preservation and intention. For many collectors, this penny represents the moment they first learned that not all coins are made equal. Some are meant to circulate. Others are meant to be admired, studied, and protected. The 1968 S Lincoln penny belongs firmly in the second group. So the next time you see a small S beneath the date on a shiny copper penny, pause for a moment. You may be holding a piece of American mint history, a coin born during a year of change, crafted not for pockets, but for posterity. And while it may only say 1 cent, its story is worth far more than that. Most people would never look twice at a 1967 penny. It feels ordinary, common, almost forgettable. But what if I told you that this simple copper coin was born during one of the most unusual moments in American money history, and that certain examples have sold for far more than 1 cent? Today, we're uncovering the quiet story behind the 1967 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, and why collectors still search their change for it. The coin we're talking about is the 1967 Lincoln 1-cent piece. At first glance, it looks like many other Lincoln pennies from the 1960s. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait faces right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial sits on the back. There's no mint mark under the date, which often makes people wonder if something is missing. In reality, that missing mint mark is one of the most important clues to understanding this coin. To understand the 1967 penny, we need to step back into the mid-1960s. The United States was facing a major coin shortage. Silver prices were rising, people were hoarding coins, and everyday change was disappearing from circulation. Vending machines, parking meters, and small businesses were struggling because coins simply weren't available. In response, the U.S. Mint made several dramatic decisions. One of the most important was removing mint marks entirely from coins dated 1965, 1966, and 1967. This wasn't a mistake. It was done on purpose. The goal was to stop collectors from pulling coins out of circulation based on where they were made. By removing mint marks, the mint hoped people would treat coins as money again, not collectibles. So when you see a 1967 penny with no mint mark, that's exactly how it was supposed to be. Every 1967 Lincoln cent was struck without a mint mark, no matter where it was produced. Most were made in Philadelphia, but some were also struck in Denver. Unlike other years, there's no visible way to tell them apart. The design of the 1967 penny follows the classic Lincoln memorial style introduced in 1959. On the front, you'll see Abraham Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty, and to the right is the date, 1967. The phrase "In God We Trust" arches across the top. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands proudly in the center, with United States of America at the top and 1 cent at the bottom. If you look very closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, a detail many people never notice. The metal composition of the 1967 penny is another important detail. It's made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. This gives it a warm, reddish color when new, very different from today's copper-plated zinc pennies. Many collectors prefer these older copper cents for their weight, feel, and historical connection. Now let's address the big question. Is the 1967 no mint mark penny rare? In general, the answer is no. Millions upon millions were made. It's considered a common date, and most examples found in circulation are worth only face value or a small premium. But here's where things get interesting. Condition matters, and errors matter even more. A standard 1967 penny that's been heavily used, scratched, or darkened by years of circulation usually isn't worth much. However, coins that survived in excellent condition, especially those with original red copper color, can be worth significantly more to collectors. Uncirculated 1967 pennies with strong detail and bright color often sell for several dollars. In certified, high-grade condition, especially coins graded M-66 or M-67 by professional grading services, prices can rise dramatically. Some top-quality examples have sold at auction for hundreds of dollars, not because the coin is rare by date, but because very few survived in that level of perfection. Then there are error coins. This is where the 1967 penny becomes truly exciting. Because of the massive production pressure during the coin shortage, mistakes happened. Some 1967 pennies were struck off-center, leaving part of the design missing. Others show doubled die errors, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a misalignment during the minting process. There are also examples with die cracks, clip planchets, or weak strikes. These errors are not common, and collectors actively seek them out. Depending on the type and severity of the error, values can range from tens of dollars to several $100s. One of the most desirable varieties is a strong doubled die obverse, where the date or lettering shows clear doubling that can be seen without magnification. These coins are rare, and verified examples can bring impressive prices at auction. Collectors often ask if there are fake 1967 pennies. The truth is, because the coin itself is common, it's rarely faked outright. However, altered coins do exist. Some people try to add fake doubling or modify the surface to mimic an error. Others may artificially color a coin to make it look like a high-grade red example. To identify a genuine 1967 penny, start with the basics. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams and be attracted to nothing magnetic. The details should look natural, not carved or raised unevenly. Real mint errors usually show smooth, flowing metal rather than sharp tool marks. If you think you've found something special, the best step is to have it examined by a reputable coin dealer or sent to a professional grading service. Authentication protects both the coin and the collector. Here's a surprising fact many people don't know. In 1967, the U.S. Mint did not produce any proof coins for collectors. Instead, they offered special mint sets with higher quality coins, but even these lack mint marks. That makes 1967 a unique year where even carefully made collector coins look similar to circulation strikes. Another fun detail is that because mint marks were removed, 1967 pennies represent a rare moment when the identity of the mint was intentionally hidden. It's one of the few times in U.S. history when the government tried to discourage collecting rather than encourage it. Today, collectors love the 1967 Lincoln penny not because it's flashy or instantly valuable, but because it tells a deeper story. It represents a time of economic pressure, changing metal values, and a government trying to control how people interacted with money. For new collectors, it's an affordable entry point into U.S. coin history. For experienced collectors, it's a challenge to find the best possible example or a genuine mint error. And for everyday people, it's a reminder that even the smallest coin can carry an unexpected past. So the next time you see a 1967 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look at its condition. Check the details. Notice the color, the strike, and the story behind it. That plain little cent may not make you rich, but it connects you to a fascinating chapter in American history. And who knows? Somewhere in a jar, a drawer, or an old collection, a near-perfect or unusual 1967 penny might still be waiting to be discovered. If you have a jar of old pennies at home, there's a quiet chance one of them could be telling a powerful wartime story, and it might be more valuable than you think. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1942 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a small copper coin struck during one of the most dramatic moments in American history. This coin is a Lincoln 1-cent piece made in 1942 at the Philadelphia Mint. When a penny has no mint mark, it simply means it was produced in Philadelphia, which was the main mint for U.S. coins at the time. While millions of pennies were made that year, the circumstances surrounding this coin make it special, and certain examples have become highly desirable to collectors. To understand this penny, we need to step back to the year 1942. The United States had just entered World War II. Factories were being converted to produce weapons, ships, and military equipment. Materials like copper were suddenly in high demand for the war effort. Copper was needed for ammunition, electrical wiring, and communications equipment. Every resource mattered, even the metal used in everyday coins. At the beginning of 1942, the U.S. Mint was still producing Lincoln pennies using the traditional bronze composition, made mostly of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. The familiar Lincoln cent design, created decades earlier, continued unchanged. On the front was Abraham Lincoln's portrait, dignified and calm. On the back were the two wheat stalks framing the words, 1 cent, a design that Americans had grown up seeing in their pockets and change trays. But behind this familiar look was growing pressure. As the war intensified, the government began searching for ways to conserve copper. By 1943, this would lead to a dramatic change, with pennies made from zinc-coated steel instead of copper. That makes the 1942 penny especially interesting. It represents one of the final full years of copper penny production before that historic switch. The 1942 no mint mark Lincoln penny has several features that collectors look for. It weighs about 3.11 grams and has a rich copper color when well preserved. Over time, many examples have darkened to brown, while others retain traces of red or reddish-brown tones. Coins with more original red color are much harder to find today, especially in high condition. The design itself is simple but iconic. Lincoln's profile faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head. The word "Liberty" appears behind him, and the date 1942 is clearly stamped in front. On the reverse, the wheat ears symbolize prosperity and growth, themes that took on deeper meaning during a time of global conflict. So why would a penny like this be rare or valuable if millions were made? The answer lies in condition, survival, and small differences that happened during production. Most 1942 pennies were heavily circulated. They passed through countless hands during wartime, when people relied on cash for daily transactions. As a result, truly well-preserved examples are far less common today. Another factor is minting quality. In 1942, the mint was under pressure to produce large quantities of coins quickly. Dies wore out faster, and minor errors occurred. Some 1942 pennies show slightly doubled lettering or numbers, caused when the die shifted during the minting process. These are not common, and when clearly visible, they can increase a coin's value significantly. Collectors also pay close attention to strike quality. Some coins were struck more sharply than others. A penny with crisp details in Lincoln's hair, clear wheat lines on the reverse, and minimal wear is much more desirable than a flat or weakly struck example. When it comes to value, the difference between an average coin and a top-quality one can be dramatic. A heavily worn 1942 no-mint mark penny is usually worth only a few cents above face value. But in uncirculated condition, especially with original red color, prices rise quickly. High-grade examples certified by professional grading services have sold for tens, hundreds, and in some cases several $100s at auction. For example, a 1942 Lincoln penny graded in the mid to high uncirculated range, with strong red color, has sold for over $100. Exceptional specimens with near-perfect surfaces and vibrant color have reached several $100s when two collectors compete for the same coin. These are not everyday finds, but they do exist. Because of this potential value, it's important to know how to identify a real 1942 penny. Start with a simple magnet test. A genuine 1942 penny should not stick to a magnet. If it does, something is wrong, because steel pennies were not officially produced until 1943. Weight is another clue. A real bronze penny from 1942 weighs just over 3 grams. A significantly lighter or heavier coin may be altered or counterfeit. Look closely at the date. The numbers should appear natural and consistent with the rest of the design. Added or altered dates often look uneven or oddly shaped under magnification. The surface of a genuine coin should show natural aging, not peeling or bubbling metal. Artificially altered coins often give themselves away with unnatural textures. There are also some fascinating and surprising details tied to this coin. In 1942, Americans were already being encouraged to save scrap metal and support the war effort. Many people did not realize that the pennies in their pockets would soon change dramatically. When steel pennies appeared in 1943, they confused the public. Some people thought the government was running out of money, while others disliked the way the coins rusted or stuck to magnets. That sudden change made earlier copper pennies, including those from 1942, stand out in hindsight. Today, collectors often view the 1942 penny as a symbol of transition, the calm before a major shift in U.S. coinage. It represents the last moment of normalcy before wartime shortages forced innovation. Collectors love this coin not just for its potential value, but for the story it carries. It is a tangible connection to World War II, a time when everyday objects were shaped by global events. Holding a 1942 penny means holding a piece of history that circulated while soldiers were being deployed overseas and factories were working around the clock. For many collectors, this coin is also approachable. It is not impossibly rare or expensive in lower grades, which makes it a popular starting point for new collectors. At the same time, high-grade examples offer a challenge and a goal for experienced numismatists who enjoy searching for quality and originality. As you sort through old change or inherited collections, the 1942 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is worth a closer look. Check its color, its sharpness, and its overall condition. Even if it turns out to be a common example, you've still discovered a small survivor from one of the most important years in American history. And who knows, the next time you hear the quiet clink of a penny in a jar, it might not just be spare change. It could be a wartime witness, waiting patiently to be recognized for the story it has carried for more than 80 years.